Academic publishing, oh my gosh, is so daunting. You've got the drafting, the submitting, then the revising. It's a lot. It's a lot. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to feel like you're just stumbling in the dark.
So today we're demystifying the academic publishing process from picking the right journal. And yes, that happens earlier than you think, to navigating peer review. We'll break it down step by step.
And in Not That Kind of Doctor fashion, we're not stopping there. We'll also talk about how to make your work stand out and get the attention it deserves. I'm Nick Huseby. I'm an associate professor of elementary literacy education here at UNL.
And I'm Guy Trainin, professor of education here at UNL. And welcome to Not That Kind of Doctor. All right, so where do we start?
So you would think that you would start with drafting the article, drafting the manuscript, right?
Yeah.
But is that really where we start?
Actually, it isn't. So we often recommend, once you have an idea and you've collected some data, to start thinking about where does this fit in the universe of publishing. And it's really a universe of publishing. Every year there are more outlets out there.
Right, and so you're going to want to think through, once you have your idea and you've thought through kind of, oh, I could write a manuscript about this, before you start writing, do some research around potential homes for that manuscript. If you write it, where will you send it? And what I think that helps me do as a writer is it helps me focus my energy as I'm writing that manuscript if I have an end in mind when I begin. And so there's a couple of different things that you want to be thinking about as you're trying to conceptualize what is the home journal for this manuscript. I would love, Guy, because you are just incredibly productive.
Yes, I have been the last few years.
You have.
Once I cracked that, and part of it is choosing the journal, it has gotten a lot easier.
So talk me through how you think about the ways in which you locate a journal, you think about what that journal, demands and desires, and then how you match those things up. How do you think about different kinds of journals as you're working through your publication process?
So I think you have to consider a few things. One is, what are your needs? So we talk a lot about the path to tenure or the path to getting your PhD, whatever it may be. You have goals, and publication are parts of your goal. And you need to know, we talked about the tenure. Remember the tenure discussion? If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And you have to know what your institution considers as appropriate channels. Some places are very picky and say only this kind of journal, only journals in the top 25% in the first quartile count. Other places care a lot less. Know where you stand, because you don't want to put all your efforts into a publication that would not count toward tenure. So know that first and foremost. That helps you choose where you're going to go, and talk to your co-authors if you have them, because they may have needs of themselves.
Yeah,
so,
know your promotable activity.
Yes.
What is promotable at your institution?
And then you have to think about this in advance. So whenever we have, and I do a lot of interdisciplinary work or even multidisciplinary work. So if I write about, for example, world language teaching and technology, I have two options. I have two venues. I can go through the technology and I can go through world language. Those are very different sets of journals. I look at both of them, or if we're a team, we all look at them and we start seeing what are the expectations. But it also changes what we write, because in a journal about technology, I would have to do a lot more explaining, a lot more lit review about world language, because they know a lot about technology. I can make some assumptions about my readers. And the other way is also true. That is, if I'm taking this to a world language, I will have to do a lot more explaining about technology. So this really helps define what kind of work is going to go into the writing. If you start writing and then look for a place, then you may need to do some major revisions that you could have avoided. And that's where choosing early really makes a difference.
Well, and in order to like get a taste of what does my manuscript need to look like for that particular journal, it's often handy to, I find that people often read the information for authors and they stop there. I would go into the last 5-ish years, pick a sample of articles that have been published and think through what are the commonalities across those 5 articles. And then that's going to give you some idea of what to do as you yourself are constructing your own manuscript for that particular journal. And chances are it's going to be high enough quality that even if you get an unfortunate rejection, it's still going to be in good enough shape to turn it around
and send
it somewhere else. You may have to do a little bit more finagling, but it's totally doable, totally there.
In my team, for example, when we write, we have a priori choose, here's our number one choice, this is the best fit, but we have the 2 backups already ready. Here's the one we're going to go for, but here are 2 potentials. If it doesn't work here, we do some work and we send it to one of those 2. And so we have 3 options from the get-go, and it's a really good education, especially when I work with graduate students, to say, we are expecting, I mean, if a journal says we accept 10% of the articles, it means 90% get rejected. They need to go somewhere. Some of them go nowhere. Some of them are not good enough, and that's fine. But my going in assumption is I've got a chance here, but it's not a certainty, so I have my backups already planned.
Right. And that takes off some of that decision fatigue. Like when you get a rejection, yes, it's going to smart. It is going to hurt a little bit. But if you have that backup plan, it's easier to stick with. You have 24 hours to 48 hours to mourn.
Yes.
And then
move on.
Move on. Let's go. Life is short, right? Like get that manuscript shoved somewhere else.
And this goes back to your favorite thing, and that is have an Excel sheet, a spreadsheet that says, this is what the topic is, this is where our first choice is, here are the 2 follow-ups, with the link already to the submission. So everything is set up. You just go into your spreadsheet after 48 hours or whatever you need to mourn, and you go, okay, so where are we sending it next?
Yep.
And that's part of the conversation, whether you're a sole author, and there are fewer and fewer of those nowadays. So please write with others. Again, look at your tenure process. If it says you've got to have sole authorship, please do that. But often first authorship is enough in that case. And just have it ready. So when you're not starting to search now for a new journal, you're already there.
And one of the things that I want to touch on that you mentioned was, if there is a manuscript that's like, quote unquote, not good enough for like a top tier journal or a mid-range journal, I would caution viewers to avoid predatory journals. And these are journals that are willing to publish things for a price tag. They often tout themselves as, we're open access. The peer review process, if it's there, isn't quite as rigorous as it might be through other kinds of journal venues. And oftentimes you're paying for, I like to think of it as you're paying for a CV line.
For sure.
And as a academic, think about, is that worth it? Like, I know these prices for publication can range anywhere from $500 to up to $3,000 in education, and that's a lot of money.
So I do want to put 2 caveats on that. One is there is legitimate open publication. So some journals have an open option, and that is if you have money in your grant, you can take this very prestigious journal and make that article open for everybody. And that often costs quite a bit. It depends on which journal it is, but it can cost even $1,000 or so. But you are publishing in a reputable journal.
Yes.
So open access is not a bad idea. It's just that they are predatory.
The difference there is that a journal like the one that you described, your manuscript is accepted for publication. It's going to get published regardless of whether you opt for open access or not. In a more predatory journal, you have to pay for the open access. It's the only way that it's going to get published. So think those two kinds of things through. Are they charging you to get your manuscript published? If they are, that's a bit more of a predatory behavior. You may want to rethink. There's other options to be doing that, thinking about regional journals, thinking about other sources to get those things published so that you're not.
And partially, what you want to do is, again, go look back at what have they published. Is this the neighborhood you want to be in? Look at the authors, but look at the papers. So going back to the advice, read a few papers that were published there. Methodology, how good is it? Is this the neighborhood you want to keep? Because that's going to stick with you and people are going to give it that kind of weight. I have published in a few places that did ask for a little bit of money just to keep that thing afloat. So inquiring and seeing what quality of journal there is there, that's great. But remember that it's probably not going to pay out if you're really paying to publish.
Right. You will get that line on your CV, but it may not result in much else.
And I do want to say that there is one option we didn't talk about because we talked about journal publishing. But if you've got early results or a pilot or something like that where you can publish, proceedings is another way to go, especially in my area in technology, engineering education, a few other areas where I do a lot of work. There are a lot of conferences that have proceedings. And that's not, usually if you have great data, you don't want to publish it there because then you can't republish. You can publish with the same data, the same article only in one place, but you can do some initial findings and publish it in a proceedings, or if the paper gets rejected and you're like, I don't want to pay X number of dollars, proceedings is a really good way. Most of them are actually open access or they're part of a big batch that actually universities have access to. And so you can actually get published in a different way.
Which is a good option. We like options.
Yes.
So let's switch a little bit. So you've got your idea, you've located a potential journal home, you've worked on your manuscript, it's in good shape, you send it into the journal. Let's talk about the peer review process, because this can be murky.
And I want to talk about before the peer review, because this has changed post-pandemic and with the growth of AI. That is, we're seeing a lot more desk rejections. And desk rejections are when the editor or one of the co-editors take a glance. They do basically a glance at the paper and see is it a good fit or not. The reason it's happening is less people are willing to review and we have more papers to review. And so one thing is the number of reviewers in many journals have changed from 3 to 2. So the peer review is based on 2 feedbacks, and they're doing desk rejections a lot more often. So basically the editor sits, looks at the abstract, maybe glances at the paper and say, is this a good fit? They're not even asking, is it a good paper or not? It's just, is this what we want to publish about? And this is where that early work comes into play. You want to do 2 things. One is you want to make sure it's a good fit, because you're going to see the one advantage about the desk review is you get the answer within a week or 2. You know.
And not immediately.
And this is not about the quality of your paper. This is 99% about fit to journal. They read your abstract and they decided it's not a good fit. So 2 things. One is make sure this is a good fit. 2, make sure your abstract makes it really, really clear that there's a fit here. So that's a different take, and this is an insight that I just recently have. And in this age of volume, the abstract becomes more important than ever.
Yes.
Clarity, and making sure that an editor reading this will say, oh yeah, this fits within my journal. So if it's a journal, for example, an international journal that emphasizes that international aspect, make sure you talk about it in your abstract. Otherwise, you're probably going to see that article back within 1 week to 10 days. This is what it takes. So that's really important. Now let's talk about the peer review process.
Oh, I think that's definitely part of peer review,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
And so after you've gotten that kind of desk response, if you get that desk response, either it's going to be sent back to you or it's sent off to peer reviewers. Peer reviewers are going to have anywhere from a couple of weeks to maybe a month, a little bit more than that, in order to read over your manuscript, provide notes back to the editor, and provide some kind of decision about that particular manuscript, either major revisions. And when we're talking about major revisions, it tends to be something structural, or there's something with the analysis that needs to get addressed. Like it is typically heavier lifting. And so that's the major in major revisions. If it's minor revisions, it tends to be maybe you didn't pay attention to a particular piece in the lit review, or you need to tweak or be a little bit more clear about your methodology. It's not necessarily, it's renovation, perhaps, versus building an add-on.
Yes.
Like you're fundamentally going to have to change the structure in a major revision. You're doing more of a remodel.
Yes.
In the minor.
And there's revise and resubmit, which means major work.
Right. So when you're thinking about, and there's also rejection, which is a thing.
Yes.
It happens. It happens to everyone.
More often than we'd like to admit. Or maybe I'm freely admitting that I have had so many rejections.
Oh my gosh, so many rejections in so many contexts. Like, what's a context I haven't been rejected in? That is a question. And so when you're thinking about getting that feedback back, there's a couple of things to pay attention to, because the editor of a journal, if they're worth their salt, is going to help you in their editorial letter sift through the feedback that you're getting from your reviewers. And reviewers can sometimes be ambitious.
Yes.
We'll say that. And give you a very long laundry list, or be particularly nuanced in what they're asking you to do. And the thing about that peer review piece is you can decide with the editor what to respond to. And I think that's one of the most important things. But also keep in mind that if a reviewer is noting it, chances are that's something that you do actually have to deal with.
One way or another. So a response that doesn't go into the article. For example, in a recent article that we wrote, there was already at the top end of what the journal would accept. And there was a request for something that would have taken another 2,000 to 3,000 words. That is, they didn't say, take this off and add this. They said, add this. And I'm like, this is a great suggestion. It is a very important topic, but here's the problem. We have no room.
Right.
We just don't. So, and that's an appropriate response, but you have to manage it with the editor.
Yeah. And hopefully the editor, by the time that you get that, is already going to have managed that, you would hope. But when you're thinking about looking across the editorial letter and the revisions that have been asked of you, the other peer reviews, build your list. Like, what are the things that you need to do, pulling from what the editor has said, and then if there are things that the reviewers have mentioned that don't make it into the editorial letter, investigate them a little bit, see if they're worth it, and think through the work that you actually have to do in order to get that manuscript ready to ship back out. But what you might also find, like you did, is what's being asked of you is not either possible or feasible.
Yeah.
You may want to think about submitting to a different journal.
Yeah.
if that's how that's working. And that's an option. Simply because you get a revise and resubmit doesn't mean that you have to resubmit. You already have that feedback. Do the feedback that's useful and send it elsewhere.
Especially if you get a sense that they're asking you to do something that you can't do, add to manuscript too much, or in other cases, the response is, well, you need to go back and collect new data. And that's sometimes possible. And I've had colleagues who have done this, who were advised use a newer version of this data because they were working with archival data, and they did, and that was great. But if this is the data I have, right? I can't go back to the same participant and ask them new questions or do a new assessment. They're gone. They're older. They're whatever it is. It's not going to work. And therefore, there's nothing you can do. I mean, in a perfect world, would I like to collect all the right information? Yes. But if it's a design flaw, it's a design flaw that time has passed.
Well, and one of my least favorite, I should say, forms of peer review is, oh, you should have done this. Yes, but I didn't. This is what I did. Talk to me about what I did.
Yes. And what I can do to make the paper better.
Right. Understand the assignment.
Yes. Not correct my research design, which may be problematic. And you can say, and we've both reviewed many papers, and sometimes they say, this is just, the design is not good enough to be published. We're very sorry. And we move on. I'm not saying you can resubmit with new data. That's not, I understand that's not possible.
No. And so when you've gone through that feedback, when you've thought about what they're asking of you, and you've done the revisions, track changes are important at this stage because in your editorial letter back to the journal, you want to not just say, oh, I revised. In that letter, you want to lay out how you've revised. If you're looking for a template for this, look at Not That Kind of Blog on notthatkindofdoctor.net, where we're providing a template that literally lays out, there's a table involved.
Yes.
Because I love a good table of what change was asked, what the change actually is, and how that impacts the manuscript, because you want to make a very clear argument for, I've addressed this, there are some things you might not address, and here's why.
And really what it is as a reviewer, this is the first thing I read. I go, if this is a resubmission, and journals try to keep the same reviewers for the next round because they don't want suddenly to have, because if you add a new reviewer, you might have a whole new set of things, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm in resubmission, now you're sending me to do 4 other things. So the tendency is to get somebody who's already reviewed this. And so I want to see that you took my comment seriously. Even if you say, this is a great comment, but I can't do it, I want to see that you have taken the time to think through the problem and think about a response. And then I read the full paper. So you want to have that table, and again, Not That Kind of Doctor blog, because that helps your readers, and you want to make it easy for them. You don't want them to go back and start from scratch. You want them to go first, here are the comments we made and we thought were important. How did they respond? Do I feel comfortable with this? Have they done enough work? And then I go and read the whole thing, but it's really in that response that I put most of my effort on a second and third read.
And then, so hopefully that then results in a move into in-press. And then you want to, the currency of academia is in citations.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say it like that? That is where...
Well, a little bit. Now there's more and more downloads as well, especially if we're writing for practitioners. So download numbers start having an impact.
Well, and that's where open access comes into play. But if we're thinking about tenure, promotable activity, I don't know that downloads are there yet. But when it gets published, that's not really your final step.
No.
Right? You then have to start thinking about how to promote your work. And you're really good at this.
Thank you for that. Yes, you do want to get that word out.
And so talk a little bit about how you do that. What are some of the things that you're doing in order to affiliate people with your work?
So I think that there are a number of channels that really help get that message out. And the first one is that you want to make sure that a version of the paper lives in a place where people can access it. So I love the academic journals. People are making money. That's making a lot of people happy. But I want to make sure people have access to it. So in different platforms, you can actually store an earlier version of the paper, an almost published version of the paper legally. So we use Digital Commons. And that's a place where the university has a place where you can hold all versions. So if somebody doesn't have access to a library, there's a way to send them the link and they can get the access to your piece. So that's really important. And Digital Commons is immediately searchable. And so when anybody is doing a search on any Google search or any other search, it'll come up because it's crawlable, so to speak. The second piece that is really important is you've got to use your social media. You got to know where your people are at. If you're talking to teachers, it's more Facebook. And so I'm using social media. If you're more to other academics, you got to know where they are. It might be Blue Sky has emerged recently, and I'm having a lovely time on Blue Sky. Use LinkedIn is a great, especially for international scholars. That seems to be incredibly productive, but find ways to do that. The other thing to do is when you're going to conferences, I'm going to conferences quite a bit more recently, you talk about your papers, you send people a link, you include that with a QR code at the end of your presentation. Find as many ways as possible to link people to your work, because it is a world where we're flooded with information and it's really easy to just drown out the voice. People don't get journals, they get electronic journals, and that's harder to even see that somebody published.
Right.
So all of these are really, really hard. If you have a profile on Google Scholar, which you should, by the way, and I'll add to the blog about the places you can have a profile. You want a manageable number of profiles. You don't want to have too many, because it gets crazy.
Right. You don't want it to be like the care and feeding of your academic social media should not
take over your life.
And it can.
And we did talk about time blocking. So I use the same time block I use to update my CV because, something new was published. I need to put it on my CV. That's the same time I put it on social media. And so I plan my blog post inside that same time block because, again, you want to protect your time. You don't want to spend too much time on social media. No. I love social media. This is not where you want to spend your academic time.
See, I don't love social media. And so one of the things, surprisingly, I don't love social media. So one of the things that I do occasionally, I haven't done this in a while, but I have seen other people do this, is in your email signature. I am reading currently, and then other people have had, I have written. And they have links to their latest articles in their email signature.
And so manage one or two platforms. Google Scholar is one of them. Usually it gets everything automatically. You just need to visit and see that it's registered. Give it a week or two, and it does.
Build up your profile a bit there. It is kind of like Facebook for scholars.
Yes.
So you want to have it be engaging.
And the second one is ResearchGate. I find ResearchGate incredibly useful in following people, in getting people to follow you, and in putting together. This is where I get the most requests I get for a digital version of my paper is from ResearchGate. And this is a way, because people who ask for a version of your paper are much more likely to cite it. They might not be able to, at your university, get access to it. You're making their lives easier. You're making yourself more likely to get that count up.
Exactly. And so when you're thinking about promotable activity, engaging in these strategies and these tactics are helpful in terms of that. So publishing, really, it can feel like a big old maze, but it's one that is more easily navigable with the right tools and the right mindset. It's not going to take away all the challenges, but it's going to make it a little more tolerable.
And today we really have broken down choosing the right journal and choosing early, navigating the peer review and amplifying the impact of your published work. This doesn't take away the need to design great studies and to do great writing. It's just that if you have these structures in place and way of working in place, the rest of the work gets easier and you worry a lot less.
And remember, when you're thinking about publishing pipeline, you're not just thinking about this particular manuscript and thinking about the next paper. You're really thinking about how to share ideas and contribute to a broader conversation and think about how your work in these journals is doing just that.
So thank you for joining us on Not That Kind of Doctor. If you're ready to refine your publishing game, check out our publishing roadmap on the blog.
And don't forget to join us next time when we tackle another challenge to help you thrive in academia and the law and beyond. We'll see you then.